Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
We are back, and not just Jordan and I are back, but Amy's back. Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you.
It is, welcome back to episode 9 of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. Today is July 9th, 2018, and in this episode, we are moving on from Scadrial, saying goodbye for a little while, and visiting the world of Nalthis and Brandon Sanderson's Warbreaker. For those of you listening to the podcast or watching the videos on YouTube, remember that as we record each episode, we've got a live chat running, so make sure to join us every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. You can take an active part in the discussion and let us know exactly what you think as we are talking about it.
And you can see how appropriate Bill's shirt is.
I decided to go thematic today. We're talking about a lot of colors. As Jordan stated, I am Bill, and I am joined, as always, by my colorful co-hosts, Jordan and Amy. Welcome, guys.
Wow,
Hello.
colorful, so thematic.
Come on, we gotta go thematic.
Yep.
So how have y'all been?
I caught the plague, but that was because I have.
They
a
actually
3-year-old.
had that over there. I read a book about it once.
Yeah, not that plague, thankfully, but
Oh.
just the run of the mill, get it from the airport because I have a 3-year-old who like touches things and licks his hand. But otherwise, we're good.
Oh, 3-year-olds.
3-year-olds.
The delight that they bring.
Germs, all the germs.
And hopefully they learn not to do that by the time they're functioning adults in society.
One would hope. We'll see.
Although I've been watching ER, and apparently there's more people than I thought who don't learn those things.
I try not to think about that. 'Cause it makes me...
For those of you who are unaware, Amy has been our globetrotter. She's been representing the Sandersonian Institute. She's basically trying to open up a satellite office in the UK, and
We tried to get a class over at Hogwarts, but it didn't quite go over.
Didn't work.
yeah, they said that, I was going to
Wrong
say
kind of
something
magic.
clever, and it just died in my head.
It's
So
the wrong kind of magic.
that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so before we get started, everybody remember that for the first several episodes, we're basically going through, taking a broad look at each book, typically giving each book about 1 or 2 episodes. We might have to go a little bit longer once we hit Stormlight. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't understand. It's not like those books are two Mistborns or 2 anything else.
They're not like could be a weapon.
Yeah, Warbreaker is just over, I think, between 500 and 600 pages long, and Oathbringer.
652.
Okay, and
It's in the
Oathbringer is
paperback, it's 652.
and Oathbringer is 1,300 pages long in hardback. So
Yeah. The point is, Warbreaker itself could already stop a bullet. I don't want to think what Oathbringer can stop. Don't get me started on...
calibers,
That's the next one. Dang it. I'm done.
Oh, you mean
mortars,
No, the next book. What's the next book called?
Warbreaker.
No, the one that's after Oathbringer.
The
The one
fourth
that's
one?
coming
The
out.
fourth one's not.
Oh, we don't know yet.
Oh, we don't know yet? Okay.
No, like what are you talking?
Number 4.
I know that Stones Unhallowed was a working title for the one that does Seth, but we don't know if Seth is going to be the next one or the one after that. So, and by Seth, I'm talking about the assassin in white, not the guy who was on the show with us last
Oh,
week.
that explains why you had that little note, because I was like,
Seth without a Z.
see, because I always say Sizeth in my head.
Ah, and I think it's supposed to be sort of Seth.
You see, this is the thing. Sizeth would be totally correct for Warbreaker universe.
Oh goodness, yeah. Anyway, so like I was saying though, we're talking about each of the books. once we've gotten through all of the books, which should take a hefty chunk of time, we'll go back and we're going to start digging into some other theories and predictions and just get into the meat of it. And so, but if you have any theories yourself, of course, feel free to email us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com. Give us what we're calling our aluminum foil hat theories. Basically, any predictions you have, anything you want to talk about, any thoughts that you might just think, ooh, this would be a cool topic of conversation. We'd love to hear what you think. So send us an email again. That's cosmerestudies@gmail.com. So one of the things about this book that really stands out to me is the original cover. Before we even get into the actual book itself, it is gorgeous. Because
if confusing.
So if you see it, yeah, it's gorgeous. I have such mixed feelings about it. The art is by Dan Dos Santos, and we've actually got a link. It's really cool. There's a video of him actually painting the cover for it, and it looks really, really cool.
I didn't realize it was painted.
It's on a canvas about, I'd say the canvas is about 4 feet by 2.5 feet or 3 feet.
Huh.
And so
I didn't realize it was a painting.
Yeah, so we've got a video for that in the show notes. So if y'all want to take a look at that at some point, it's really, really cool looking. But so the thing that is interesting about the book cover to me, though, it's beautiful and it's incredibly inconsistent.
Because Nightblood doesn't look like that.
Nightblood doesn't look like that because Nightblood is
Black.
clearly stated to be a black blade.
Uh-huh. I mean, that
okay,
could've...
I have a question for you, Amy.
Yes.
Who is this? Which character is this?
I was gonna say Ciri, but Ciri never dealt with Nightblood.
I hear Yanni.
Dude, don't.
And Vivenna wouldn't have worn a dress that scandalous even by the end of the book.
Well, not just that. Ciri didn't use biochromatic breath.
So yeah.
And so it's sort of like a combination of the two, I think.
It's just a
I
potpourri.
thought about how it didn't make sense on who it was. I just thought it was pretty, and I just put it on there.
But that said, seriously, look at that artwork. That is just stunning. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and give a special shout out to Dan Dos Santos. We actually emailed him, and he gave us permission along with all the other artists that we feature in our opening video. So thank you again for letting us use that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Thank you.
That was a huge one. So yeah. Now, this book was also written differently than any of the other books that Brandon wrote. Do y'all know sort of the story behind that, or?
I know one little tidbit
Okay.
that you didn't have in the notes yet, but I think I saw on like the wiki or something like that, and apparently somebody who he works with was like, you need to have a book with some color in it because everything else has been dark and dreary and everything else. And he's like, I'll do color magic. So this is what we get, is color magic.
That's true. Now, the funny thing, though, is Brandon has said, like, one thing he wishes he had done is been a little bit more specific about how color is involved. Because essentially, in this series, it works like fuel. You just need color. And he said that that's one of the regrets he has, but he can't really go back and change it now. So, he wish that it had a more
stringent requirement for how you
a more specific system behind it. So, but the thing that was really cool is the way the book was published. Is he published this book entirely online for free on his website, and what he did is, as he wrote it, he would release a new draft. And so I think he ended up putting on his website like the 3rd and the 7th draft, because there were 7 drafts, I believe.
I think
Sounds like Brandon.
I could be wrong on that number, but I think that's right. Now, I actually read both versions after he published them on his website. And it was interesting seeing some of the differences, and some of them bugged me at first, but then looking back, it's one of those things just like, he made the right call. Because, for example, the Denier statues, College Phantoms, they didn't have, like, they were just statues in the original draft.
Oh, they weren't actually the.
There were no
Yeah.
skeleton. There were no bones or anything. And so it was just, and it was
Did
just.
they get animated still?
Oh yes. Oh yes. That's definitely a major part of the.
Yeah.
But I think like one of the things that actually did sort of seem cool is because over the centuries since all of the mini war happened, there had been additional statues built, which they talked about, and so each of those added to the army.
Oh.
But
Who built those?
different returned. They were just statues though.
Oh, okay.
Because again, this isn't the old draft because the new statues, there's just more statues to animate.
Gotcha.
But it makes more sense because if it was stone, it would essentially have been like creating another Nightblood type thing, because those are inanimate objects. That
Yeah.
no, that'd be sentient. I don't remember.
What could go wrong?
Anyway, it was different.
There's no organic part to it.
And so, but yeah, so he published multiple versions, and it kind of freaked out his publisher because they're just like, well, they can get it for free, so why would they buy a copy? And Brandon's response was, well, yeah, but they could always get it for free at the library, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you've been reading it and you see it and you like the author, you're gonna want your own copy,
Right.
which is where he makes the money.
Yeah,
Well,
the
and
thing
if you're dedicated enough, you can get anything for free nowadays. It's just a
Right.
question of what do you care about
Morality.
supporting.
Yeah.
And Brandon has said since then that actually there wasn't really a significant impact on the sales numbers. So cool.
Because I think I read one of the earlier online versions of it, but I don't think I read both. But I own 2 copies now because I was going to the UK and I was like, I'm not bringing my nice paperback or my hardback, so I bought
Mhm.
cheapo like $9.
Yeah, that would take up
paperback.
a bit of space.
Yeah, and we tried to go extra light. We had like some really giant backpacks that we wore, so we wouldn't have to do rolling bags. Even though everybody there had rolling bags, so I don't know why it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, I
like rolling
We were
bags.
light on space. Yeah.
There's one other thing that always stood out to me about this. I don't know if your copy has this, Amy, but see that little logo right there?
Yeah, I don't. It's
That's-
not on my paperback.
That's the old Sci-Fi Channel's logo.
Why was that on there? I didn't know.
I
that.
have no idea. I've never understood that.
Did you look it up already?
I haven't looked it up. So if you
Okay,
wanted to
I'm not
check
looking
that
it
out,
up.
because
That's weird. I don't know.
I remember noticing it and I just never sat down to look it up. But yeah, so
Just kind of random. Yeah, I
Especially
don't know if
'cause
mine has
it's-
it or not.
quite clearly fantasy. And this was back when the Sci-Fi Channel was pretty strictly just sci-fi.
And how was it spelled? Because they went through
It's
several different
It was
versions.
It's
It was before Sci-Fi.
correct. Yeah.
So which
Not
one
why.
was it? Sorry.
SCI.
CIFI.
I can totally spell SCI. Wow. I'm dyslexic in my talking, apparently. Okay.
But yeah, okay. And then one other thing that stood out about this book before it was written, or before we even dive into the plot, is this is the very first book that Brandon wrote that his wife Emily actually had direct input into. I don't know how that may come up. I do notice that female characters play a much more direct role. I mean, Vin of course was the main character of Mistborn, but Vin was also Vin.
Can I
That makes
expound
sense.
on that?
Absolutely, please.
Having the female experience.
Ab-
Having been a teenage girl, there were moments that I'm like, I was totally Siri. Oh wow.
Mm.
I actually thought that, and wow, that's embarrassing to look back on. But I kind of could tell the difference, especially knowing and rereading it and going, yeah, I can tell that his wife was like, no, she probably would have thought more like this, and that's not how a girl's brain would follow that process. And I mean, granted, girls are all different,
Right.
and everybody's different, but Vin was very much a damaged street urchin.
Right.
And so
that's
she
what-
did
that's
never.
what I mean.
So she had, when she did get her femininity, it was getting the balls and getting the formal training, and so she never was totally comfortable with it. Whereas Ciri and Vivenna are like, I have to wear pants? What is this? And
Mhm.
different things that way. Like Ciri totally loved, and she's like, oh, I gotta dress up in all these pretty colors because she's always been stuck to brown and gray and everything, and so she really just like goes all out with being pretty, and she's like, yeah, this is awesome and whatever. And Vivenna like had to be eased into it a little bit, but she still felt really weird. She's like, I can't wear trousers. That's just not something I do. And so it's very much a different cultural thing, because I mean, I grew up wearing pants all the time,
Right.
but there are other girls that don't, and so I could see it having more of an effect that way. But
And-
it felt how their personalities felt a little more real that way.
Right. Well, and the other thing is with Vin, she was raised being told, "Don't be feminine. Don't let anybody know that you're a woman, or you could end up dead."
Or violated or whatever else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have to say that's an amazing author workaround. Man, I've never been a woman.
I'll
got
give
a
this girl
solution.
reasons to not be more feminine.
Boom, problem solved.
It only becomes a problem when you do 2 or 3 books that way with different characters, and you're like, wait a minute, they're all doing the same thing.
This is starting to feel like a horn that I'm shooing things into. I know it's not how it works.
There was one little thing with Venna that really got on my nerves, and other people did it too, but the rolling of eyes, it happened a lot.
I
And
blame
I didn't
that.
realize it until the second reading, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they're doing it all the time.
I blame that on Robert Jordan,
Yeah.
because every single woman in the Wheel of Time
Roll their
would
eyes.
roll their eyes or huff. There was a lot of crossing their arms under their breasts, and then one character would always tug on her braid. And it was just like every single one of them meant men are being stupid, or meant
and
I think men are being stupid.
With Venna, it's more these mercs are being stupid, or they're making
Right.
another weird joke, or whatever else. And I could sit there and be like, okay, it makes sense with the situation, but it feels like she's doing it all the time. And I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of it was in response to Tong Fa. So I mean, I was like, okay, it makes sense, but
Right.
it started to grate because I'm like, oh, when she roll her eyes again and again and again. And I realized when I was writing fanfics forever ago, I would catch myself like way later looking back and going, wow, that character does that same tick or whatever all the time, and that's really obnoxious.
Mine is always quirked an eyebrow. That's the one
Oh,
that
I
I
did
write
that.
into all the time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, there's only so many things that we do to ridiculous jokes. So other
Yeah.
than, mentally saying, like, she thought the joke was dumb, how else do you non-verbally communicate that?
Yeah, so that's why I was kind of torn back and forth with that, where it made sense when she did it, but it happened a lot, so it felt
Right.
repetitive.
This is something this is an odd subject for me. So whenever I wrote just for myself, I always hated writing said over and over again. And so I used all the different versions of it. And then I started reading Brandon and started paying attention. He says said a lot, and he doesn't let it bother him. And I then went back and read my stuff, and then I'm like, he chortled. He, like, as just look at the thesaurus. And I don't know. It's one of those things where, yeah, I understand that maybe it's a bit much. At the same time, I just don't know how we get around that, because that's one of those things that it's automatic.
With said, I from what I've seen and whatever else, that it hides in the background enough that it doesn't get obnoxious. And so, unless it's more of a specific thing and you're trying to convey a laugh or something really super specific, said is your best bet.
A lot of times, another thing I've seen is they just don't put anything. It's just they have
Back
the quote,
and forth and back
and
and
that's
forth
it.
and back and forth,
And
yeah.
it works mainly if it's an actual dialogue between two people.
Mhm.
But actually, Brandon at one point did a really cool experiment. I think the story was called "I Hate Dragons," where the entire thing is written in just dialogue, no description other than it's just a conversation between a dragon and a guy who apparently he smells delicious to dragons, and so dragon hunters carry him around as bait.
Oh, no
And
wonder
so-
he hates dragons.
But so that's just another thing is you don't always have to say anything. You just say the line, and based on where it comes in the conversation, you can figure out who's speaking.
Or what is said. Because there are some, because you can have characters that have more idiosyncratic ways of speaking, and so it'll make more sense for
And
them to have said it.
that, and then also some authors who Brandon doesn't write profanity in his novels. He doesn't like
He writes it all over the place. I don't know what you're talking about.
he doesn't like our
Right,
culture's profanity. But he creates his own. Sometimes, though, you'll also read, and I think Brandon does this too, is it'll just say he swore. It doesn't say exactly what they said, but It'll
get
say
the
either
idea
he
of-
swore or he said something foul or he said something that would
or
make
he cursed,
ex-mercenary
or
blush,
yeah.
or
Yeah.
and so.
So you can get across the point of they're really angry, and they express
Right.
themselves, and you don't have to give the exact word.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before we're starting to dive into the story, there is one other story that I want to hit before we actually get into the workings of the book. So like we said, this was the first book that his wife had direct input into. But there's a cool story behind it, because when Brandon was 16, he's mentioned that he had this idea to propose to whoever his future wife is. He said he had two goals. He wanted to be a published author, and he wanted to get married. And so he decided he wanted to actually propose to his wife by dedicating a book to her and having the dedication say, "Will you marry me?" He would have had it worked out with the store owner that there would be a ring taped to the next page, and he would go in with her, say, "Hey, look, my new book's out." Pull it out, hand it to her. Yay, everything's happy. But
Man, aiming high. Most people are just happy to be published. Brandon is a teenager. No, not only will I be published several times, but I will be able to use this in order to publish my marriage.
well, the thing is, he realized later on that there are typically years between finishing a book and it getting published. And he was like, I don't think that Emily would want to wait 3 years for me to propose to her just so that I can do it in a book.
And it would have been really awkward if she said no, because it would have been in every copy.
Look. Man, there's a lot riding on that.
Well, and that's the funny thing, because if you look at the dedication, it just says, "To Emily, who said yes." The thing is, he actually proposed to her with a poem, and he said he wanted to use that as a dedication in Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians. She said that's a little bit too public, because this was the way that, again, he had proposed to her. But when he said, "Well, could I dedicate this book to you?" she said, "Oh, absolutely, I love it." So
Yeah, doing that feels a lot more normal. And I mean, they were married by the time it came out, right?
I
think.
I think so. Yes, I believe so. The other thing that's really cool is, so when Brandon and Emily got married, Brandon commissioned a bunch of swords, like full-size metal swords, and named them from a bunch of different names from his books. And the one that he actually gave to his wife, who carried around during the reception, the name of it was Lightsong.
Whatever I do for my wedding, it won't be as cool as that.
You may be cool, but you're not multiple swords for your friends at your wedding.
I'm really
Mine
not.
isn't that cool.
I think Brandon got married in a kilt too, so there's also that.
He's all. I'm just determined he's living a cooler life than I am.
My wedding wasn't that cool, but it was okay. We liked it anyway. So.
It's cooler than mine because forever alone. But
I can't say anything.
It's too real.
too soon. All right, so now that we've talked about all this stuff that only tangentially relates to the book, let's open the book and crack the pages. So, of course, with Brandon, the thing that he's best known for, and a lot of times if you're selling a new Brandon book to somebody, you typically start with the magic system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do one of y'all want to tell us about Awakening?
No.
Go,
Or should I?
Go, Jordan, go.
Okay. So
I'm trying to have my throat be weak.
I find Awakening very interesting as far as Brandon's magic systems goes, because it's the first one that's available to everyone. Every other magic system we've seen from him requires very specific things be done, but in theory anyone from Nalthis can awaken, because they can all at least make one lifeless if they want to give up their own breath. And
the thing is, I'm already about to say stuff that might be spoilers for other books. Should we just go ahead and give the warning?
Let's wait. We're at the
Okay.
start. But it's so anyone.
I won't say what book. At some point we see Hoid awaken.
Yeah.
And Hoid isn't from Nalthis, so it's pretty. It's technically available to anybody. Hoid may have had to do something.
We don't. Hoid is his own category of we don't know, but it's interesting that anyone can do it. And as such, because anyone can do it, it's the only world in which the magic confers status automatically. Every other world we've been on with Brandon, they still have to fight for their status. In Mistborn, the Ska had to hide it. In Stormlight, there's other stuff that's going on with the magic system they're still trying to figure out. But here, if you have breaths, everyone can tell, and to the point where just having breath is like having a fast pass card at Disney. You just go right through the doors and get into sensitive meetings. I have lots of breath. Well, you must be important. Go right in.
Yeah.
Reminds me kind of the Romans, how like the different status too, especially with the amphitheater type thing where they have a lot of their debates and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's like in How I Met Your Mother when Barney buys the suit that has diamonds sewn into the thread.
What? I didn't get very far in that series.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. But yeah, that's the thing is once you have more breath, you start putting out this aura that affects the colors around you and makes them richer and deeper.
And that was another interesting thing. The various heightenings. That he hasn't had a tiered magic system like that before, where there's many levels to it, and each one confers different subtle abilities, but abilities that matter and help in that world. Obviously the first one, being able to see the colors, I thought was very interesting. Just because you put out an aura, it's very slight, but you put one out, and then you can tell who else has an aura. And then you get higher, and you have things like perfect pitch and perfect, color recognition?
Yeah, it's third.
And so I found... perfect pitch is interesting. The fact that it affects... that's auditory. In a visual system.
Well, it's not entirely visual, though. If you remember, the religion is referred to as the iridescent tones, which signifies color, light, and sound.
But what I find interesting about using... the fact he uses pitch first, and then color recognition after. It reminds me... I have a physics degree, and so harmonics are a big deal in physics. And harmonics make a ton of sense in sound. They don't make a ton of sense in light specifically. And so I always found it very interesting that when we, especially with, I think Light Song probably gave us the best view of this ability as he would view paintings. And, I found it interesting, first of all, that the painting is different for him because he can see things a normal person can't. And he can pick out, it's like, oh, these are very subtle. This clearly was painted by someone of the third heightening or above. And that level of artistry, I found very interesting that it took an artist of a specific level to make it so that only one type of person who has an incredibly rare ability would be able to appreciate it.
And not only that, they have what they call the artist's script, which is a series of colored dots, which, based on the shade and their specific arrangement, could only be... And so they have poetry written in colors.
Yeah.
And it's such a cool concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. He took the concept of color and said, okay, how can I really, pardon the pun, enrich, this this concept? And I remember, because I've done a lot of stuff, I made the overlay and stuff, so I've done a lot of stuff with color in digital medium. And so many times it's really hard to tell the difference between the different, colors that you do. And it's very, I just hear he talks about, he can see all the subtle shades. And I just think, as I do a hex code to change the color just slightly, I'm just like, Light Song can see the difference.
This is for Light Song right there, yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't burn the overlay the way the artists in Tutelar burn their artwork when they give it to gods.
And we appreciate that.
We do.
Well, I mean, and they don't always get burned, because Light Song did keep a painting.
That's true. Yeah, he did.
But generally they get burned.
And I'm already wanting to cross into other series again.
And then, so I guess there's agelessness and instinctive awakening, invested breath recognition, command breaking for Lifeless, greater awakening and audible command, and then color distortion and perfect invocation.
The command breaking isn't just Lifeless. Lifeless are included, but it's not just Lifeless.
But this is the other thing. So we've gone into the various levels. That's only one half of the magic. And that's what's interesting is this with one magic system, like you could sit there and have these abilities and have that just be a magic system and it creates a world around it and that'd be impressive. But he adds awakening on top of it. There's a line in the story that it doesn't quite apply to the magic, but I thought it sort of like could apply to the magic. It's one of the more, frankly, just dorkly endearing moments between Cicebron and Ciri, where Cicebron says, and it's like, you're full of color, and it's all, it's always struggling to come out. And then, he says things like that, and Vivenna says things talking about how when she first tries to awaken the rope, she, can feel that it wants to be alive again, that it used to be alive.
Right, because it's made of living fibers.
Yeah.
Or formerly living fibers, right.
And it's the fact that they awaken things, they bring things to life that were once alive. And it's just very interesting how things like intent and how specific your command is and how you visualize it really matter with all these commands.
Well, and that plays out across the Cosmere. I mean, when talking about soul casting with in the Way of Kings, where things that have been something for a long time want to remain that way, and so it's easier. You have to convince them to change. Everything has sort of a mental history.
There's also the Emperor's Soul that ties in really well with that
too. Absolutely. And so I think we're going to get a lot more of that as the Cosmere expands, and it's going to as the actual Cosmere magic system kind of develops a bit more.
And this is something that the reason I find this so very interesting is Brandon has said Warbreaker was sort of a prequel for the Stormlight archive. And when he first said that didn't make sense to me because it just didn't make sense because I didn't see a lot of crossover. But as you sit there and start to examine how the magic system works, you start to sort of see what he means by that.
Well, in the original Way of Kings, Vasher was the one that he scrapped and had to rewrite. Vasher was actually a major character in that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so
I feel sad to admit that I didn't recognize Vasher until someone pointed him out, and I'm like, wait, what? Because it had been so long since I'd read Warbreaker that I didn't.
Should we go ahead and mention
spoilers?
Let's
go. I think we're now there.
Spoilers.
All right, guys, we cannot continue this discussion without giving a spoiler warning. We are going to be dipping into other series. This is not just going to be Warbreaker. We're dipping into other stuff in the Cosmere. So if you don't want that to be spoiled,
then skip.
Now is the time to start skipping. But honestly, there's just so much wonderful crossover. It's hidden very well in the other books, but it's there, and I love it.
Oh yeah, I mean, rereading this, I'm like, wait a minute, there was that, and I'm spotting so many more things now that I'm focusing on more of the details because I know most of the plot already,
right?
So I can focus better on the details that are hidden.
So anyway, just so you know, we're going to start crossing over. All right, good. So here we go. So you didn't recognize Vasher in what?
In Stormlight Archives, I didn't recognize him.
In the
second
Words of Radiance? Yeah, Words of Radiance.
Words of Radiance.
Yeah,
I didn't recognize him.
So those of you who don't know, Vasher shows up on Roshar. He pops up. He's a gruff old Ardent who is teaching Adolin and Renarin and Kaladin how to fight against Shardblades.
And I do remember, I think it was Kaladin's like, he's not really religious though for an Ardent, but it's like...
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is he uses a lot. He talks about colors a lot. Talks about
and
pick up on.
And that's how people recognized him.
Well, and it's because he says white on black a couple times. That's why I recognized Vivenna in Oathbringer because she said it as well.
Yeah, see, I totally didn't connect it. And Josh is like, my husband was like, you didn't catch that? And I'm like, I'm sorry. I don't know.
And while we're not talking about Words of Radiance, just the line that, Jordan, you got it right on your shirt. Hello, would you like to destroy some evil someday? I screamed out loud. And Jordan said, what just happened? Like, Jordan was in the room across the hall, and he just said, what? I just said, avalanche! And so, oh gosh.
And I understood.
Yep, exactly. If I was reading a book by Brandon and I say avalanche, you know what's happening. All right, so
I want to talk about Nightblood.
Nightblood.
Let's talk about Nightblood, and especially because we're talking about awakening. So I think that's a good way to go into it.
So okay, this is going to go to both plot and awakening. The moment where Vasher starts teaching Vivenna about awakening is a really cool part, because it's an info dump. It's an info dump in all the ways that you're not supposed to do it in a book. However,
Vivenna even comments on it too. She's like,
yeah,
dense.
Yeah, but it's perfect, because if you're gonna, because the problem is, whenever you do something in a story, you have to ask yourself, what does this do? And it needs to do multiple things. It can't just, and that's the problem with an info dump. Info dumps only tell you about the world. Brandon brilliantly uses it to give you a hidden depth into Vasher that you're like, wait a minute, this is all very technical and scientific from a guy who Death said is dangerous, who up until this point, you have seen that Vasher is a very dangerous and, frankly, at times, ruthless man.
Yeah.
And yet, all of a sudden, he starts going on like he's a philosophy professor in, a 200-level course. And you're like, wait a minute. And the thing that's interesting is he says there's 4 types, and then he goes through, he explains type 1, type 2, and type 3. And then Vivenna's like, type 4 is, and then he's like, wait a minute, and he's like, well, so type 1 was a sentient living thing returning, type 2 is a non-sentient living thing returning, type 3 is an inanimate non-sentient thing returning, so type 4 would be, and he's like, and we're done.
That's enough for today.
For that reason, I'm out. Meanwhile, she has heard the voice of Nightblood, and she's starting to put it together. Something happened. Yes. And that's what's cool. What I love about Nightblood is he's A, the only type 4 that we know about. B, they said it took 9,000, or the 9th heightening level of breaths to awaken him. Mind you, Sesebron is said to be at maybe the 12th heightening. So 3 steps below God King.
And we only know of 10. So.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then there's the fact that he came out wrong.
And he's so endearing.
Oh, I imagine
so earnest too.
Like, if we ever saw Nightblood in the cognitive realm, I'm convinced he'd look like a puppy with too many mouths.
I know.
The way I imagine it is, I've described it as a puppy with a nuclear warhead in his mouth.
Oh.
So the thing that's interesting,
he just wants to give it to somebody so they'll throw it for him.
So there's a couple things I noticed in this reading that I didn't notice in the first reading. He only talks to Vasher at the start, and then he does talk to Vivenna when she picks him up, and she's all nauseated and everything.
Yeah.
After she goes through her trauma in the slums and Denth betraying her and all that, she then starts, like Vasher follows her, and that's when Nightblood tells Vasher that he likes her. And
he's like, I like her. She's good.
And he's like, I don't think she likes me, but I like her.
I like her.
But the thing that's interesting is we start to see Nightblood try to talk to multiple people. And he's able to remotely cast out his ability to talk. Vivenna only hears him remotely after she's gone through her trauma. The guy who finds him in the ocean talks about how, he hears the ocean talk to him all the time. Vasher's clearly broken as well. This is a subject that's been talked about in Mistborn with snapping. We talk about it with the
That's a good point.
And so,
I hadn't thought about that.
well, because we also know that he's based on shard blades, that Vasher and his people saw them and they tried to recreate them. So there's some interesting things there. First of all, shard blades make oaths with, their actual spren, and they talk to someone.
Let's go back. We needed to give a little bit of background on that, because a lot of people don't realize that this is mostly Word of Brandon stuff.
That's true, yeah.
So, okay, for those of you who aren't aware, Vasher has been to Roshar before Warbreaker ever happened. Even though the Stormlight Archive takes place hundreds of years after Warbreaker, Vasher actually went there before the mini-war. And so that's how he got the idea for Nightblood, is he was on Roshar, he saw people with shard blades, and he thought to himself, we can recreate this sort of weapon and use it. And
we need the right command, though.
And we need the right command, we need the right amount of breath, and Nightblood was the result.
And it wasn't him who made it, it was the sister.
It was him. Well, she spoke the command. It was his wife, Shashara.
I didn't know they were married. Where did that detail come in?
You're thinking Dent's sister, because Shashara was Dent's sister.
Yeah, Dent's. Yeah, so I
married to Vasher.
I didn't realize they were married. I knew that she was Dent's sister, but I didn't know that they were married.
Yes.
Where did that detail come in?
It was mentioned somewhere.
Okay, because I didn't find that detail. I'm not surprised, but I didn't see that detail.
But it's so it's based on a shard blade, and so then when Vasher finally rips it out, and we see him go ham with Nightblood, and Nightblood goes ham on him, we see it do a couple things. He tries to cut through walls, but instead of cutting the wall, it disintegrates it. Well, it reminds me of soul casting, frankly.
Yeah, now that I think about it, it does.
Yeah, because it turns it into... it wasn't quite... It was like a smoky sludge, the way it was described, I think.
I will find.
It wasn't quite smoke. It was something weirder.
So apparently evil is what gives walls their structure.
Clearly.
So.
It's getting in the way.
No, but so the other thing that's interesting, so he wants it to be sentient, because that's what a shard blade is. It's a sentient blade, essentially. The problem is, a spren is a concept to begin with. So it has a level of nuance. He was just metal, and so he put a command that said, we wanted a simple command, something that would be elegant, and so they give him the command, destroy evil. But metal has no concept of what evil is. That does not deter Nightblood's confidence.
It's not just that he's metal. He is a sword. He is a tool used for one purpose: killing.
Yep. And I love how confident he is in his ability to understand what evil is. And every time Vasher points out that you're just a sword, you don't even know what evil is, he remains undeterred. He's just like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I'm getting it. Like,
I got this figured out, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I'm getting way better at this. And I love his confidence, his naive confidence in himself. It's so endearing.
So cute. Yeah, he gets picked up by Vivenna and he's like, I did well, right? He's like, I did so good.
You should tell me how good I did.
He's like, you should tell me that I did well. Yeah.
Well, because again, it's also the sort of the concept of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
When all he has is the command to destroy evil, everything looks evil.
Well, and I love the little things that shows that he when he says he's getting better, and he implies he's trying to figure it out, he's showing a real attempt. He is trying to figure it out. Little things like when Vasher won't draw him to kill someone, but Vasher beats him into the guy into the ground to unconsciousness. And he's like, so you won't kill him, but you will bash his skull until he's unconscious. And Vasher makes the comment that the tone isn't accusatory. It's him trying to puzzle it out.
He's learning.
He's like, so this way it works.
We're trying.
Well, because he's asking Vasher, because what he's hearing is Vasher, and he's picking up on the little thoughts that Vasher has, because that's all he can see are the thoughts. And he says, so And Vasher tells him, he's like, I don't understand my morality either. Like, you know, just
He's
look.
like, you should not rely on me for that.
It's complicated. I understand that. And I just find that little tiny bit of relationship interesting, that he really is trying. He wants to destroy evil, and he wants to destroy it so well. And it's just adorable. What an adorable weapon of mass destruction he is.
He's terrifyingly cute, and I just don't understand it.
I'm afraid of how much I love him.
It's one of the best things that Brandon has done, and I still don't understand how it works.
I'm pretty sure if I ever do make Nightblood, I'm gonna take a picture like hugging him or something just for kicks, because it's.
Again, I'm still convinced. We get to the cognitive realm, he will look like a puppy with too many mouths.
He's so...
But not just a disturbing puppy, like just an adorable puppy,
but with too many mouths.
It terrifies you when it turns its head.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so we've talked about the Type 4 biochromatic.
Frankly, it's all downhill from here.
Well, we've mentioned it though. So again, you can awaken things that were previously alive, and the more they resemble something that was alive, the easier it is to awaken them. The thing that's interesting is when they say the easier it is, it just means the fewer breaths you have to imbue.
Yeah.
And so, for example, Vasher's.
Go ahead. I was saying you still have to put in all the mental thought, and
of course the intent is incredibly important. And again, that's something that keeps popping up in the Cosmere. The intent of the shards determines how the vessels behave and stuff like that. But for example, if you look at Vasher's cloak, it's actually cut to look roughly like a person. And
that's such a brilliant touch.
From a distance, it looks just sort of tattered. But when you look closely at it, you see this vague person, which is kind of creepy when you think about it. You know, it's like one of those police outlines that you put on the ground. It's just this vague body shape.
I did find it really cute that he had one time where he had like 3 little straw figures, and he's like find tunnels. And when they found it, they like jumped. They're like, "We found it!" And I was like, "Oh, that reminds me of like police dogs and stuff like that when they're trained for to sit, and then they're like, oh, I get the ball now, or whatever. Like that's the reward for finding the thing is they have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
But I do the one thing and I get the reward, and it's great.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting about Vasher is the fact he thanks them.
I know.
And it doesn't have any impact on the story, but it's a really cool touch. And Vasher even comments himself, I don't know why I thank them.
He's like, I just do.
But he does. Okay, so, and then of course there's the Lifeless. Now what is a Lifeless? You mentioned it earlier, Jordan. You said another person can create a Lifeless.
It's typically something that was once living that you use a single specialized command to bring it back to life. You give it breath, and because it was once alive and it's in the right shape, it won't let that breath go. You can never get that breath back. But
it just feeds upon the colors on it in itself.
But it can do things sort of in the same way that it could if it were alive. And so it can take, once you give it the command, you can give it a little more nuanced commands. The most common form of lifeless we see are basically hired muscle. Yeah. And the thing that I found so creepy about them, and Light Song is the one who pointed this out when he goes down to the lifeless caverns, is how they all stand there in perfect solitary they're holding themselves solemnly. They don't blink, they don't breathe, and they don't even cough or anything that you would get with normal troops standing there. Well disciplined.
They don't care that it's dark at all. Like it doesn't bug them at all.
It reminds me of the terracotta soldiers.
Yeah.
So. And
there's squirrels too.
That's true.
Squirrel. I love his squirrel that he sends to sick on. It's not Blushweaver. Is it? Who is it that he sends?
I think it's when he's sneaking into Blushweavers. Is it?
He didn't sneak into Blushweaver. He snuck into Mercy Stars.
That's right, Mercy Stars.
Mercy Stars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang it! All their names sound like terrible WoW Blood Elf names.
Yeah, or 14-year-old D&D character names. But okay, so there is one Lifeless that we get a close look at. That's Claude. Do y'all know what's special about Claude?
He was a soldier. right?
He wasn't just a soldier.
He was our steel.
He was our steel.
What?
Yeah.
What?
And it gets even creepier because it's implied that Jules might have been sleeping with him.
Well, it's not just that. She joined up with Denth, and a lot of this is explained Word of Brandon stuff. Jules joined up with Denth because she was in love with Arsteel when he was alive. After Vasher killed Arsteel, they decided to make him a Lifeless because he was one of the greatest swordsmen of all time, and again, which would make him one of the greatest Lifeless soldiers of all time. But
it makes it even weirder in the fact that, like, when Vivenna's watching him, protecting her, she's like, I can almost see emotion in him. That he looks so determined to do it.
Well, the other thing is, if you think about it, he wasn't just a Lifeless. Arsteel was a returned.
Yeah.
And so that's like I think right one of the reasons Denth decided to do it is he wanted to see if it could even be done. Is to make a return to Lifeless, because he doesn't have the divine breath, he just has a single breath. And so it's just when I learned that, it just sort of blew my mind.
Mine's still like, no, I just
yeah. And then of course the return. Yeah. And the prime example of that is Lightsong or Sesebron. Who I just realized is the only returned who doesn't have a D&D character name.
Yeah.
So, but it's
not
just
added
interesting.
much, at least.
Well, I mean, Sesebron is a name, like that follows the pattern. The others are, Lightsong, Blushweaver, noun, adjective. You're right. So, but now, and again, this is the way that the returned work. Going into the Cosmere, apparently what's going on here is this is Endowment. Endowment is the shard on Nalthis, and Endowment is intentionally splintering herself, cutting off basically bits of her power and imbuing them on people who've died in particularly heroic ways. And so you end up with Lightsong the Brave, because the way he died was incredibly brave. You end up with Blushweaver the Honest, because even though her returned form is... Jordan, you're her biggest fan, right?
If I could nuke her from orbit, I would. I have never hated a Brandon character more than I do Blushweaver.
Uh-huh.
She's annoying.
But I can't remember when... do we find out in the book how she died?
We don't.
Okay. Word of Brandon has said that she actually was basically whistleblowing on this corrupt scheme that was going on. And so she was being honest. And so she was called Blushweaver the Honest, and then she had them change it to... She actually convinced her priest to change it to Blushweaver the Beautiful, Goddess of Honesty. Because apparently she's all about the looks. So
yeah, that was interesting, finding out that they can change, that they look how they think they should look.
Right. Which is also how Vasher's able to hide his ability, because he has to do all sorts of mental gymnastics apparently to convince himself, no, I'm not a deity.
I'm a scraggly guy with a half shaved face.
Exactly. So he actually has to convince himself.
It's one of the better reveals is the fact that we never see Vasher or Denth.
Bulks up almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we never see Vasher or Denth ever shave or groom themselves in any way.
Well, we don't see that in a lot of...
I don't think Vivenna would have seen Denth grooming anyway. That doesn't like she would go in and stare at. Though I did like the line where she is first captured by Vasher and she's like, "Oh no, are you gonna do things to me?" He's like, "I wouldn't take a woman that had been in Denth's bed." And she's like, "I never slept with him." And he's like, "Okay." But
oh man,
he's like 300 years old. He's past the... He doesn't care about that stuff.
He doesn't care anymore. He's like, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to think where we want to go from here. Do we want to just dive into the characters, or do we want to...
I think that's a good move.
Okay.
I like doing that.
So, Amy, do you want to lead us on this one? Because I know that you looked into some specific characters. You were looking at a lot of character growth.
Yeah, that's what kind of stuck out to me. Especially I noticed with the sisters how they kind of flip flopped on each other.
Mm-hmm.
How Vivenna started out very, I can't even think of the right word now, but like she did everything prim and perfect and super controlled and like as uptight as you've ever seen a character be. Like their hair can change color depending on their emotion, and hers like would not change color. Even her dad, when the few scenes you have with him, his hair changes color when he gets mad enough. But that doesn't happen to Vivenna until way later, when she's been broken in the slums and everything else, that she starts actually having her hair fluctuate on it. And it grows. I really am jealous of that, where I'd be like, I feel like short hair, and then nope, I feel like long hair. That would
Although it makes him very, very hungry.
That's okay. I'll just choose what I want to eat. So there's Vivenna, and so she starts out and she thinks she's got everything figured out because she's been tutored and she knows everything, and then she realizes the longer that she's in, I'm going to say it wrong, Hallendren, that she really has been sheltered her whole life, and her tutors did not know enough to get her fully instructed. And she gets used by Denth and does not pick up on all these hints and different things. Like she's with these mercs, and they keep saying, "You can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody," and she trusts them, and then they backstab her just like she should have expected because they're mercs. So that's.
Can we talk about that a little bit, actually? Because that is one of my hang-ups on this book.
Mm-hmm.
Which her not catching the
betrayal. Jordan and I were talking about this earlier. It doesn't feel like that betrayal was earned. Like
it wasn't as well foreshadowed as a lot of Brandon's plot twists, in my opinion.
And that's sort of, in my opinion, one of the weaknesses of this book all around. Jordan put it best, I think, when he said, "It's weird to say this about a Brandon book, but it should have been longer."
Like because... I don't know if it was me rereading it and knowing more of what's going on with him, but there were, I guess, when Tonk Fa starts losing his pets.
Yeah, so
that made me go, "Oh yeah, that's them."
Yeah, so we've discussed a bit of this on our own time. Tonk Fa, that's perfectly like he did that just fine.
He just feels off.
It was Denth that was the problem for us. Because, and this is where I think it's a bit nuanced, but it didn't feel as good a turn to me, because it felt like he was being very genuine with her and the entire time. So
everything that you see with their interactions is from her point of view, right? You don't ever get anything from Dents or any of that. And so I almost feel like, to an extent, she's so confident in herself and how she interprets everything that maybe it could be interpreted that she doesn't pick up on those subtleties because she's not looking for the smooth talker. She's not looking for the manipulative guy.
If it weren't for the fact if it's Brandon writing it, I would agree with that assessment, because Brandon gets stuff through typically that's those characters'
even with
perceptions.
That kind of, so that's my only thought that way. I haven't thought about it as deep as you guys.
The only read I have of the situation is that Denth had to have been sincere with her, and this is the mercenary side, that he was sincere and he did like her, but he had a job to do.
There's a job to do, and
so he's going to betray her. But that's not very well foreshadowed that he'll do anything for a job. To where he'll betray her.
It's the, again, surprising but inevitable is the phrase that Brandon uses a lot. It was surprising, it wasn't quite inevitable. And so it just sort of needed a little bit more.
And
the same.
Yeah, but it's the act. It's the halfway act big reveal, and so it's a bit weaker, and it bugged me the first time. Rereading it still bugged me.
It didn't bug me as much, I guess, because I was looking. I knew it was coming, and so I guess I subtly or in my head put in little hints or whatever else in the whole, where I think I was looking for, where could this hint have been? Where could this hint have been? And I don't know if I can point out any specific ones, but I do remember the scene where she's like walking around in a square and they're getting ready to rob the priest didn't actually kidnap his daughter, but she doesn't know that. And she's reflecting back on her conversations with Denth and stuff and saying, oh, well, they'd have to split the party to keep me safe. And so we're doing the smarter thing, and I'm staying with him instead of they're not wanting me out of their sight. And so it's safety versus we're ensuring that our asset doesn't get out of our control.
I think there's merit to your point about it being from her overconfident perspective. I just think it weighed a little bit too much for it to work well.
It's very possible that there wasn't quite as much, but I guess I'm just saying from what I was looking for it, and so I probably put it in there when it really wasn't as strong.
Right.
But
no, that makes sense.
So
now I will say, like, as far as that reveal, I feel like it was still fell flat for me on the second read. Something that turned out better. Vivina didn't annoy me as much in this read as it did the first time. Mostly because I could see the build up to her understandings. Like, Ciri goes in with an open mind on things, and so her chapters aren't frustrating because she's learning. Whereas Vivina, I mean, she's a brick wall. She has to have things
she has her
down.
Viewpoint, and everything should fit into the box. And so she's like, well, that doesn't fit, so I'm going to smush it in there and make it fit how I want.
There was a couple of things that I really liked that were just small, even when she was still sort of in her brick wall phase, that she saw and things changed. One that I noticed a lot more this time was her admitting that while she had all this profane breath in her point of view, she did see the beauty in all the colors.
Yeah,
and
she's like, it is pretty.
And I found that interesting because that was still in her brick wall phase. The other one that I found interesting was she always looks down upon the Hallendren for how they dress, because they dress very provocatively and very colorfully, and she views it as they're doing it to sort of revel in their sin, essentially.
Yeah.
And what changed, it was just one line, but I liked it, is where she's in like a full-length dress, and it's still colorful because she's trying to blend in, but she's seeing them wearing a lot less and showing a lot of skin, and just in her head she's like, but it is pretty hot out. And she's sort of like,
that would be nice.
That would be nice. Yeah, she starts to see that there is, like, she's starting to see that form and function don't necessarily, like, have to follow what the line she's thinking. And so it made, when she ends up actually having to go through the trauma, she has done some of that thinking.
Yeah.
And I didn't pick up on that the first time I read the book.
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing her going from being so staunchly austere and then becoming an element, or
an awakener.
Awakener.
What's wrong with me? It's
Awakener.
Yeah. Man, but had she become an Allomancer, we'd have a real
awesome.
story.
Yeah, I'm gonna go change that now because I typed that. Wow, missed more on the brain.
Man.
But oh my goodness, so it's kind of funny. I come from a family of 4. I don't know, I probably talked about this before, but like everybody else in my family is like, does not break many rules. They're all pretty good, and like in most other families, I would have been like the perfect kid. But like in mine, I was the cream sheep because I wasn't full black sheep, but the cream sheep. Because I mean, I pushed things a little bit more, and I would try and sneak out to boys. Oh boy,
Heaven
I know,
forbid.
So terrible. I know, so rebellious. But I mean, compared to other, I would have been fine. It wasn't really that big of a deal. And so I kind of, in a small way, my sister, I have an older sister and the brothers, and so I almost could see a little bit comparison of Vivenna being a little bit like my sister. Not that my sister was uptight or anything, but like she didn't get in trouble, really. And whereas Ciri would have gotten in trouble all the time, and I kind of got in trouble. I kind of saw a small parallel that way. But anyway.
I vote cream sheep for a title.
Yay, cream sheep! I made a title. So, but then should we move on to Ciri? Since we've kind of talked about Vivenna, or did we have any thoughts
It's
on
sort of hard to talk about one without the other.
I know.
Well, and that's one thing that's interesting is if you look at it, both of them are two different sides of Serene from Elantris.
Mm-hmm.
like if you split her in half, then part of her is Ciri and part of her is Vivenna.
Okay, King Solomon.
Yeah. Not literally split her in half.
Sorry.
Sagittal cuts.
But then it also seems like they're taking responsibility and like flipping it either way. Like you either accept it and it's like everything that you are. That's what Vivenna kind of was, or you're totally denying it and running away from it, which is what Ciri kind of was.
And they end up kind of meeting in the middle.
And like going a little bit, but
And the thing that I kind of like about it is you look at their two situations because, Vivenna was raised, and I apologize for my inconsistency in saying Vivenna or Vivenna. I do say both, and it's just,
we know who you mean.
It's just the way. But she was raised to be the God King's wife, to be the perfect wife, the perfect bride, the perfect, diplomat and whatever. And Ciri was raised to be, outgoing and impulsive.
She's given free reign. She was not as...
The big thing that they...
And so you mentioned the role reversal.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if Vivenna had been sent to be the God King's wife, she couldn't have done what Ciri did. And Ciri had been the one to go after Vivenna, she couldn't have done it. They both had to get broken and rebuilt in a completely different situation than they were used to. And they were both the stronger for it and able to succeed where the other one couldn't have, even though it was their area of, quote, strength.
I have a feeling Ciri would have died on the streets somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the thing I found most interesting about it is when they sent Ciri instead of Vivenna, Ciri wondered, I pissed my dad off that bad that he sent me away. Vivenna says that in her head, she's like, why didn't my dad trust me with this? The Hallendren court says, that sly dog, sending the one we didn't do anything with.
We didn't think to research that one.
Yeah, and then, in the chapter where he actually sends her, the only motivation he had,
and this is heartbreaking,
was that he's like, I can't send Vivenna. I love her too much.
She was his favorite.
And so he sends Ciri, and
that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I couldn't think about it too hard because I have two kids, and one of them's driving me. Well, they're both driving me crazy. But I couldn't.
Yeah, but one of them didn't get you sick this week, so we know which one you're sending to Hallendren to get eaten by the God King.
So that it doesn't work for the sending a wife. But yeah, I mean, and you think about how they think about the God King and the fact that they're like thinking he's a monster and all these horrible tales about him and stuff. And poor Vivenna growing up knowing that I'm gonna have to go make a baby with this thing. That's just like a horrible, horrible thought to me. That's just ugh.
Yeah, but what I love about that is it's entire, like, that's a family right there, and that's also politics on the Hallendren side, thinking, he's so clever. And when it's actually a much more human thing, and that one decision has some pretty massive consequences. But I found it hilarious that they're all sitting there in the court just being like, oh, he's so clever to do that. And it's just like, man, they really are giving him a lot of credit.
They're giving a lot more credit than he actually did. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Did he send an assassin? Is this a secret assassin child that we didn't know about?
Lightsong checks her out and he's like, nope, this is not an assassin.
Well, that's the other thing I love, is everyone's like, oh, we're so, this mysterious new queen we have. And then Lightsong's like, I mean, I could talk to her, and we could...
You can't talk to her.
Yeah.
But she's right there, I'll just go chat with her.
Lightsong's very cut the knot.
He just goes for it. But yeah, Ciri's very fun, like, looking through her thought processes and stuff, I'm like, I can definitely relate to a lot of it, like, looking back through my preteen and teen journals and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I had that same thought process where I was like looking at it now, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was being an idiot. But that's how her view of the world and my view of the world is you're very self-centered, even if you think you're looking out and looking at other things, but you're only 16, 15, 14, whatever, and you have no grasp on the huge outcome of and everything else. It all ties together. Whereas
You're
Venice,
self-centered
huh.
about your open-mindedness. You're
Yeah,
very
you think,
close-minded
I
about
am
how open-minded you
so
are.
cool, and I know everything, and yeah, not so much. But yeah, it was kind of interesting watching poor Siri, and she's shoved into the bedroom, and she's like, and the bathing and blue fingers.
No, one of my favorite moments with Siri is just after she's been kneeling there for, is it 6 nights? And finally,
it's been
her back is killing her.
And finally,
she's
just
like,
like,
"Would you
I'm
get on
done.
with
She's
it?"
like, would you get on with it? And then she just pales, her hair turns shock white.
She's like, oh no,
what did I just do?
I just yelled at him, and he could kill me. I don't even know how. And poor Sebron probably is like, what?
And that's the thing is, Sebron, he's been built up so well as this imposing figure. And Sebron is another one of the things that I think Brandon did so well in this book.
Oh yeah.
Because first off, he's enormous because he's a returned, and returned just are big.
They swole.
All of the furniture in the palace is built oversized to dwarf everyone else, and so he just sort of fits the furniture almost.
Yeah.
But he's just this naive little. I mean, he's an adult, but he's a child.
Yeah, he hasn't learned all these other things, and
he's had one person in his life who actually cared about him, and she was taken away.
Yeah.
And the only thing he has to remember her by is this book of moral fairy tales, and he's used that sort of as his moral compass.
My two favorite things he says is when he's showing Siri that book, and he writes and explains to her, "Now, they're just parables. The monsters aren't real."
But you can, just from that line, you can imagine the conversation that he had with his mother, who said, "Now, just so you know, these aren't real monsters. You don't need to be afraid." And so he thinks, I need to pass this information on.
But this is the thing that I love about that statement. He's 50 at this age, I think, at that point.
Yeah, he's a couple decades at least.
Yeah, I think
Siri's
about
definitely. I think he was because he said he'd ruled for 50 years already or something.
Oh, really? Okay,
Could
I
be,
missed
yeah.
that.
I think he's fit. But the point, the more important point, the reason I love that line is because Siri is closer to the age he was when he first read those books than he is to Siri. So to him, she does sort of seem that young and that small.
Right.
And so I just found it incredibly endearing. The other thing I loved, and I thought was hilarious in kind of a morbid way, was when they start talking, and she's like, "What did you think was going on?" And he's like, "I did find it intriguing when you would disrobe." And
I didn't know that. She's like, "Oh goodness, I don't even."
she just goes shock white, and I'm just laughing. I'm like, yes, intriguing. That's the word for a male seeing a woman just undress in front of her, and just lay herself out, and it's just like, this is interesting. I could get used to this.
I have a thought that we probably shouldn't explore in the podcast, but I just want to express it.
I'm going to be so mad if you don't go forward.
He was stillborn and returned. So he's been a returned his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Do returned go through puberty?
I think it's stated
Do returned exist beyond puberty?
No, so I think it is they do sort of explain that they do have, because he talks about how they age
grow
up
until they hit the perfect age, and then they stop. So I think he went through puberty of
some kind.
Version.
And that's the other thing.
But it's probably the cool puberty where your skin doesn't get all the stupid zits.
Puberty.
Stupid cool puberty.
It
always happens in Disney specials.
Jordan, you can't say that. That's a potential title drop, and we've already got Amy's cream sheep. So
you can't have it.
Dang it.
But stupid.
Okay, sorry. I don't want to touch your precious. My apologies.
My cream sheep. But no, I felt for Siri with the bathing scene with Blue Fingers when he just walks into the room with the little servant boy, and she's in a tub with all these ladies bathing her, and she's like, "This is already weird enough," and everything. And then all of a sudden, there's a guy talking, and
he's like, froth about,
he's
make
fine
bubbles.
froth about, and I love it how he turns around. He's like, "Really, I've got children to learn you. and then he turns around and like he turns the servant boy too. The servant boy doesn't do it.
I always imagine him just sort of putting his hand on the kid's
and then,
head
like,
and just sort of turning.
That's how I thought of it too. Just like, nope, she's
Uh-huh.
upset about it. And then like he comes back in later and she's like, we talked. And she's like, really? You're still upset about this?
You're not over this?
You're not over this?
Oh gosh. But yeah,
And
so
then she has to fool the priest. That would have been a really mortifying moment. And then when he's like, so, because then he's like, well, are you pregnant yet? Sissa says that to Siri, and she's like, no. And he's like, well, we've spent a night in a room together. Obviously, that's how it works. And she's like, I'm not touching that.
Well, I think
nobody's had the talk with him.
His actual line was, "I think we're doing something wrong. The baby hasn't happened yet." And it's like, well, as you mentioned it, yeah, you are kind of doing a few things wrong. There's a few extra steps. And what I love is how bad this priesthood is. They're like, he needs to make a baby. And not one of them thought to ask, wait,
tell him how.
Does he know how this works?
Well, because the thing is, I do think it makes a ton of sense in a bureaucratic sense. Let's say he is 50 years old. Trelides is probably not the first high priest he's ever had. So I could totally see what falls through the cracks. He hits puberty, but they're nowhere close to marrying him. That high priest is like, I don't want to tell him. That's going to be weird. And then Trelides becomes the high priest, and he just assumes the previous high priest told him.
Come on, he's how old? He knows, obviously.
Or then, of course, there's the fact that nobody is allowed to speak to him because they're considered unclean. It's such a zealous religion that people assume because he is a god, he knows these things, and it's just like this poor child who lost his mother, who was taken away, the one person who cared about him and would have had this conversation with him, was taken from his life, and so he just has no idea. And so
he doesn't have it, and he can't ask except for the artist script.
Well, because again, nobody will speak to him. And so that's the other thing.
His priests are the only ones who can talk to him.
And that's the other thing that's interesting. Stepping away from that with Siri. Again, she has everything that she could possibly want except a friend. And it's just an interesting concept, because she walks into a room and every possible thing that she could want is there.
They just bring it to her, yeah.
And she finally, she doesn't have any friends until she finally talks to Lightsong.
Yeah.
And so, but okay, we are starting to run out of time, and there is so much that we haven't touched.
Oh my goodness,
we are definitely going to have to do at least one other episode. I don't know if we can do it in one, which is funny because I was not expecting to spend a lot of time on this book. But there's just so much here, especially in retrospect when you look at the Cosmere. There's just it's rich, and so we should probably start wrapping up. But
so I guess we'll just get back to the other characters next.
Should we mention Hoid? Just because that's sort of what we've been doing.
Yeah, it's his biggest appearance of all the books up until this point.
So we'll talk about Hoid, and then we'll have to end. But okay, so yeah, this is the most spotlight that we get for Hoid. I mean, he goes by his name, or the name that we know him by. And he's basically given a full chapter, and it's a long chapter, and it's an important chapter. And so, and this is probably the hardest one to miss, because he shows up, they call him Hoid, he tells a story. Hoid is known for telling stories.
If you miss him in this book, just turn in your Brandon card.
Yeah, it's just,
I didn't know who Hoid was the first time I read it.
But you didn't miss him.
I didn't miss him. I didn't remember him, but I didn't miss him. I just was like, okay, there's a storyteller called Hoid. And I didn't.
Yeah, so Jordan, you talked about how when I learned about Hoid after looking at the Time Waster's Guide after reading Hero of Ages, that was my origin story. This was when I stopped and I said, okay, there's something here. Like, I was interested, there's a character that shows up across several books. When he showed up here, it was just like, okay, now I'm intrigued. Partly because I've just always loved storyteller characters, but also just because he knows things. Clearly, he knows something, and he was doing something funky with all the dust and the sand and the leaves and the powders that he's thrown around. Jordan doesn't think so. I feel like he was using his Yolan light weaving during that.
I just don't think we know enough to make that assumption.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I want to know where all this sand comes, because it sounds like he has whatever Link uses to store in, because he just keeps coming up, sand here, sand there.
Pockets.
It's just like, what? Who is your tailor, and how many pockets do you have in this robe?
And your poor washing person. My goodness.
What has it got in its pockets?
Well, but the thing that I found most interesting about this appearance is the fact that Ciri picks up on the fact that his beard is probably bleached white. Like, he's trying to make himself look older than he is. Mm-hmm. And she's realizing, wait a minute, what's this guy up to? This isn't quite... And I love that she figures that out, because it tells us something about Hoid. It tells us, A, that he's not, like, you know, he's trying to hide himself a bit. Mm-hmm. So why? Like, why is he trying to make himself appear older? Is that for her benefit? Is that for the storytelling bit?
Is better, you know, for the job.
And so you're not sure. But the other thing I like is that he completely plays the part of, I'll tell you the story you want to hear, but he does it so blatantly that she's like, so what's the real one? And he does it, but he does it just enough.
Master.
Yeah, he does it just enough to get her. He's purposefully missing. It's sort of like Vin when she's soothing Venture.
Venture, yes.
And, like,
Strategy.
where she wants him to notice it, to make him, like, do things. And I feel like here he's doing something similar, where he wants her to ask those questions. He doesn't want, for whatever reason, he doesn't want to just tell her. He wants her to ask the question.
Yep.
And again, why? We don't know, because we don't know what he's doing. We don't know what he's up to, because he's Hoid.
Because he's Hoid. The other thing that I like, though, is in Stormlight, when we see Hoid, we see a few bits of evidence of his time spent on Nalthis. Because, you know, for example, in Words of Radiance, there's a scene where he's talking to Kaladin. And at one point, I think he pulls out a flute and he plays a few notes and he says, perfect pitch. That's new. And it's just like, I know what you're doing, Hoid. I see you. I see what's happening here. Which means that he's at least of the second heightening, which was 200, which means he has at least 200 breaths at that point.
Which is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. And then again, when we see him in Oathbringer, he awakens a little doll to, you know, for the little girl.
Girl, yeah.
Yeah.
That scene was hard.
So it's really interesting seeing these little touches of, he's like, hey, remember this place? This is important. It'll come back. Just remember it. So
give it time.
And so, because I think this is probably Brandon's least sung book. Elantris has the notoriety of being his first one. Mm-hmm. This is his only other standalone in the Cosmere. I mean, even the Emperor's Soul is on Cell. This is the only work that he has on Nalthis. If you look at Arcanum Unbounded, it's the only planet that doesn't have an essay, because there was no short story on this planet, so he didn't do it. And Brandon said he plans to write one out, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's so underappreciated. There's just a lot of good. There are aspects to it that I do have issues with it. I will admit that, but it's still a really good book, and I'm excited to dive in a bit more. So, all right. So before we go, as always, we want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to keep creating the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. The show will continue to be free for everybody, but if you want to support us, even with just $1 or $2 every episode, you can go to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. When you become a patron, you get immediate access to our Discord channel, and we've got a budding community there. We've had some fun discussions already, and we'd love to grow that. On Discord, you can continue the discussion about the Cosmere and the show itself. You can give us feedback. You also get bonus content like the 6-7, which is a collection of 7 pieces of content that Amy, Jordan, and I find each week, or every 2 weeks rather, that we decide we want to share with you. You'll also get early access to any bonus shows we produce. automatic entry into any giveaways that we have, and as we get more patrons, we'll be able to unlock that goal, which is the next one, I believe. You will also help us to continue to make the show and improve the quality of the episodes. As we get more patrons, we're going to be able to record episodes more frequently and eventually invest in better equipment to improve the audio and video quality for our listeners and viewers. Now, of course, before we go, each of us has our own projects that we're working on. Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we can find more of your stuff?
So I am on most of the social media sites. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Vero and
Vero.
Twitter. Yeah, Vero. And,
I'm on Venmo. You could just send me money.
No, I like Venmo too. I have that. Yeah. But I do cosplay stuff, and I do random. I'm gonna have random vacation pictures because I have a bunch of those where I'm storming castle, looking at castle.
Did you have fun?
Yes, it was very fun. It was really nice to just not have to worry about, okay, gotta get the kids fed, gotta do this, gotta do that. And it was just kind of, we can just go and do whatever. We can be grown-ups without little people. Kind of weird. So it was our 10-year anniversary, except that was last summer. But it happened, well, it was last fall, actually, and then we're doing it now.
Time happens faster when you have kids.
Yeah, it's all good.
I wouldn't know.
but yeah, then look for me under Coincidence Cosplay, or on Twitter, it's Coincidence Cosp.
Is there an underscore in that? Or is it not?
I don't remember. I don't ever have to log in. I will double check that. But because I'm just always logged in. But I also have my dog laying on the floor over there, so I'm not gonna make her come over here. She'll be grumpy.
Who is Cosmere Puppy?
Cosmere Puppy. She's Cosmere_Puppy, I believe.
Yes.
My goodness. And I have a cold and it sucks. Yeah, there is an underscore under.
Okay. So Coincidence_Cosplay.
Because it's just a huge word.
Is it Coincidence_Cosp?
For Instagram, it's cosplay.
Okay.
It's just Twitter is the one that's short because it's too long.
But is there an underscore on Twitter as well? Sorry, I'm stalling that.
I don't ever have to look these things up. You're asking me hard questions.
It'd be important. It's kind of important for our listeners to know how to find you. While you're doing that, Jordan, what about you? Where can we find your stuff?
You can find me at twitch.tv/splicestream. I'm really proud. I'm starting a new amiibo league. That's where we take 2 amiibos and someone else takes 2 amiibos, and then they beat the crap out of each other. The league is called Salty, the Seasonal Amiibo League Team Invitational, because every physics major at their heart is a supervillain who wants big acronyms. And it's a lot of fun. We also do the Saturday morning stream, where I have in between each match nostalgic commercials, like, say, Crossfire. Hope you get caught up in the Crossfire. And I don't know, we had a bunch of fun. My team, they played in such a way that they tried to give the game away, almost came back, but still gave it away. And I was laughing so hard at the end of it that it hurt my cheeks. But I don't know.
It's magnificent to behold, so you should watch it if you get a chance.
I'm quite proud of it.
Have you made a highlights video of that one?
Of not that one. I made a highlight video of something that happened earlier, but not of that one. Not yet. I've been too busy trying to get Salty going. But yeah, twitch.tv/splicestream. I stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays.
Yeah, and my Twitter page.
6 p.m. Mountain Time on Tuesday, Thursday, 9 a.m. Saturday.
Okay.
So my Twitter one is one word. Coincidence.
One word.
And then COSP is capitalized. But,
okay, cool. And then for me, when I'm not here, I write board game reviews at the Innkeeper's Table at www.innkeeperstable.com. I did finally publish my review of Takanoko. That's been in the works for about a month and a half because reasons.
Show your board.
So I will in just a second. Don't worry. But if you want to learn more about one of the most adorable board games ever, it's got a tiny panda figurine, which is just like that big. Then check it out over there. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Innkeeper's Table. I also want to give a shout out to a group that Amy and I are in on Facebook called Fans of Ep009. It's around another blog, but we have a gift exchange over there, and one of the people who had me to give a gift kind of outdid themselves.
If you're listening, this isn't really working.
Yeah, so that's my logo. If
there's-
you're listening, this is a wooden plaque that's wood burned and has the logo for the innkeeper's table burned into it, and
it
it's
looks
kind of.
amazing.
You should just post a picture on Instagram because you got that to do that too.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And so,
We'll make visuals
yeah.
easier to access.
or they can check out the video as well. So,
Yeah, that too.
so.
Sneeze.
If you have enjoyed the show, we would love it if you would go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. Aside from becoming a patron, that's the best way to support us. Rating the show helps our listeners or new listeners to find us and build the community around the show. And then, of course, remember to share the show with friends, family, and other people who enjoy Brandon Sanderson. We're, of course, going to be talking more about Warbreaker during our next episode. There's way more than we could cover this episode. But before we sign off, Amy and Jordan, do y'all have any final thoughts for this episode?
I remember liking this book, but I liked it even more than I thought I had during the reread, and it was really fun.
I remember enjoying Nightblood. I didn't think he'd become like my second favorite character of all time.
He's so cute.
Jordan, tell them about your wishful thinking for Brandon.
Oh, I just want at some point somehow Kelsier to be wielding Nightblood in one hand, a shard blade in the left hand, probably wearing shard plate that's somehow awakened. I don't know. I just want to give everything to Kelsier because he's my favorite, and it's not a good idea by any stretch of the imagination, but it's mine, and I'm willing to make that mistake.
I just had a thought, Jordan. Writing a giant AVR from First to the Sun.
Of course, perfect. We could upsize it somehow.
Just mix it all in there.
And he has an awakened electric guitar on his back that's playing itself. So.
While riding a
Okay.
shark off into the distance.
So there's some fan art if somebody wants to draw it right there.
Yeah, right. Please.
So
please, somebody draw that and send it in to
So,
Innkeeper,
real serious here.
Cosmere
If you
Studies
are an
at Gmail.
artist and if you are inclined, if you could draw my version of Nightblood, the puppy with too many mouths, I greatly appreciate it.
I kind of don't want to see that.
Don't be silly. Of course you want to see it.
Part of me wants to make it plushy, but that seems hard.
That
Oh,
does seem
man.
hard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You probably shouldn't do it. We don't like doing hard things.
Oh, man. All right, well, that'll do it. In addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, our listeners can find our videos on YouTube or the audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by doing a search for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us and contact us through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile at Cosmere Studies. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear what you think of the show, what questions you have. What do you want us to talk about during our show? Sometimes we might need to take a break from the actual books and just discuss some other topics within the Cosmere, and we would love to hear some suggestions from you for that. We'd love to hear your theories regarding what Brandon's got going on and is planning for the future of the Cosmere. Any input you have for us, you can email to us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com, as well as on our social media accounts or in the comments section of our videos and on YouTube. That's all we've got for this week's episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. So on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember, there's always another secret.